Hello, today's daily reading comes from the book of the Apocrypha. We are reading from the book of Jasher, chapter 68, and it reads as follows. And it was at that time the Spirit of God was upon Miriam, the daughter of Amram, the sister of Aaron, and she went out and prophesied about the house, saying, Behold, a son will be born unto us from my father and mother this time, and he will save Israel from the hands of Egypt. And when Amram heard the words of his daughter, he went and took his wife back to the house after he had driven her away at the time when Pharaoh ordered every male child of the house of Jacob to be thrown into the water. So Amram took Jochebed, his wife, 3 years after he had driven her away, and he came to her, and she conceived. And at the end of the 7 months from her conception, she brought out a son, and the whole house was fitted with a great light as of the light of the sun and the moon at the time of their shining. And when the woman saw the child that it was a good and pleasing in the sight, she hid it for 3 months in the inner room. In those days the Egyptians conspired to destroy all the Hebrews there, and the Egyptian women went to Goshen, where the children of Israel were, and they carried their ones upon their shoulders, their babes who could not yet speak. And in those days, when the women of the children of Israel brought out, each woman had hidden her son from before the Egyptians, that the Egyptians might not know of their bringing out and might not destroy them from the land. And the Egyptian women came to Goshen, and their children who could not speak were upon their shoulders. And when the Egyptian women came into the house of a Hebrew woman, her babe began to cry. And when it cried, the child that was in the inner room answered it. So the Egyptian woman went and told it to the house of Pharaoh. And Pharaoh sent his officers to take the children and slay them. Thus did the Egyptians to the Hebrew women all the days. And it was at that time, about 3 months from Jochebed's concealment of her son, that the thing was known in Pharaoh's house. And the woman hastened to take away her son before the officers came, and she took for him an ark of bulrushes and daubed it with slime and with pitch, and put the child therein, and she laid it in the flags by the river's brink. And his sister Miriam stood afar off to know that what would be done to him, and what would become of her words. And God sent out at that time a terrible heat in the land of Egypt, which burned up the flesh of man like the sun in his circuit, and it greatly oppressed the Egyptians. And all the Egyptians went down to bathe in the river on account of the consuming heat, which burned up their flesh. And Bethia, the daughter of Pharaoh, went also to bathe in the river owing to the consuming heat, and her maidens walked at the riverside, and all the women of Egypt as well. And Bethia lifted up her eyes to the river, and she saw the ark upon the water, and sent her maid to fetch it. And she opened it and saw the child, and behold, the babe wept, and she had compassion on him, and she said, This is one of the Hebrew children. And all the women of Egypt walking on the riverside desired to give him suck, but he would not suck, for this thing was from the Lord, in order to restore him to his mother's breast. And Miriam, her sister, was at that time among the Egyptians' women at the riverside, and she saw this thing, and she said to Pharaoh's daughter, Will I go and fetch a nurse of the Hebrew women, that she may nurse the child for you? And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, Go. And the young woman went and called the child's mother. And Pharaoh's daughter said to Jochebed, Take this child away and suckle it for me, and I will pay you your wages, 2 bits of silver daily. And the woman took the child and nursed it. And at the end of the 2 years, when the child grew up, she brought him to the daughter of Pharaoh, and he was unto her as a son, and she called his name Moses. For she said, Because I drew him out of the water. And Amram his father called his name Chabar, for he said, It was for him that he associated with his wife whom he had turned away. And Jochebed his mother called his name Jekathiel, because she said, I have hoped for him to the Almighty, and God restored him unto me. And Miriam his sister called him Jared, for she descended after him to the river to know that his end would be. And Aaron his brother called his name Abi Zanuk, saying, My father left my mother and returned to her on his account. And Kehas the father of Amram called his name Abagdar, because of his account, and Kehas the father of Amram called his named Abigar, because of his account did God repair the breach of the house of Jacob, and they could no longer throw their male children into the water. And their nurses called him Abai Soko, saying, in his tabernacle was he hidden for 3 months on account of the children of Ham. And all Israel called his name Shemaiah, son of Nathaniel, for they said, in his days has God heard their cries and rescued them from their oppressors. And Moses was in Pharaoh's house, and was unto Bethia, Pharaoh's daughter, as a son. And Moses grew up among the king's children. Amen.